All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Amanda Demmer. I'm the Learning Specialist and Program Coordinator for Community-Based Research Canada, and I'll be moderating today's e-learning session. Today is the fourth event in a series that we've been running on young people in community-based research, where we've explored different models for engaging youth in research or in doing youth-led community-based research. This presentation is brought to you by us here at CBRCanada. Our CBRCanada Secretariat is situated on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We are a membership-based organization, so that means we're comprised of over 60 institutional or organizational members at this time. We're a social enterprise, and we have a mission of advancing community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, building capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing community-based research. One of my colleagues, Isabella or Ali, they're both here to support today. One of them will be putting the link in the chat shortly, but you can check out our website if you're unfamiliar with us to learn a little bit more about what we do, find information on our upcoming events, recordings of past events, and anything else that we've got going on. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we open each one of our e-learning events by reflecting on and amplifying the goals of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. So each month I try to choose a call to action that resonates a little bit with the theme of the presentation. And this month, our presentation will be touching on violence prevention and healthy relationships. So I'm highlighting call to action number 36. We call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to work with Indigenous communities to provide culturally relevant services on issues such as substance abuse, family and domestic violence, and overcoming the experience of having been sexually abused. So this to, again, highlight and amplify the calls from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. CBRCanada is committed to continual reflection on the interconnections between truth and reconciliation and the various topics that we approach using community-based research. We work to engage with and learn from the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples across Canada to inform our work. So our agenda for today, I'll be facilitating this event. Once I wrap up talking in just a couple minutes, I'll pass things over to our presenters today. They'll share with us a little bit about their program and the research that they've done. We'll have some time for question and answer after that. And then we'll wrap up the event today. So a couple housekeeping items. Closed captioning has been turned on. If you require or would like closed captioning, you should be able to toggle this on and off on your toolbar. We do ask that folks keep their microphones muted throughout the presentation to avoid any background noise that might be distracting or detracting from our presenters. The question and answer period will be facilitated primarily through the chat box. So I encourage you and invite you at any time through the presentation to enter questions you have into the chat. When we get to the question and answer period, that way I can look through any questions that have come up so far, and I will ask these questions to our presenters. So again, at any time during the presentation, if something comes up that you'd like to ask a question about, feel free to put it in that chat box. You're welcome to turn your cameras on if you would like, particularly when we get to that question and answer, but of course it's not required. I am very honored to be introducing our presenters today. Joining us today, we have Dr. Exner-Cortens, an associate professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Calgary. Janira holds an appointment as the Canada Research Chair in Childhood Health Promotion. She's the director of Hope Lab, scientific director of PrevNet, and she's been awarded various distinctions as an early career researcher, including the Leadership in Family Violence Prevention and Innovation Award from the Government of Alberta. Also joining us today, we have Stafford Perry. Stafford is the WiseGuyz Scaling Project Manager at the Center for Sexuality, as well as being an award-winning actor and community leader with extensive experience in public engagement and facilitation. Stafford has worked specifically with men and with boys to prevent violence and foster social change for close to a decade. He was instrumental in developing and coordinating the WiseGuyz program, which we'll be hearing about today. And he's facilitated over 100 professional and community workshops across Alberta. So Stafford takes a unique approach using experiential arts-based practices to foster healing. So I think we've heard enough from me at this point. So I am going to pass things over to our presenters, Danira and Stafford, and just excuse the brief transition here as we switch from my screen share to Danira's. Um, there we go, Danira, you can get your screen share. And
Awesome.
Stafford, do we want to just check that your microphone is working?
Testing. Can you hear me okay?
Excellent, we can hear you
Okay.
great.
Awesome.
Good. Yeah, good to see you all. Sorry for that. This is the beauty of direct service work that I do with the WiseGuyz program is there's always last minute excitement. So sorry about the scare, day and era, and nice to see you all.
It's like I assumed it was something. So real work. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us today. Stafford and I are going to talk about some of the arts-based work that we've been doing on the WiseGuyz program for the last 5 years. I'll talk about it from a research perspective, and then Stafford will offer some practice-based insights. So we just want to acknowledge that we're very fortunate to live, work, and play as guests on Treaty 7 territory in Alberta, which is home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Stoney Nakoda peoples, and the Tsuut'ina peoples, as well as the Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6. We're very grateful, as always, for the care and stewardship, and really appreciate that Amanda put up that call to action. This work has taken us to the territories of many people, and so we're always grateful for the lands that we're on when we're doing this work. So today we're going to, in this quick half an hour, give a very fast overview of what the WiseGuyz program is, just to give you some context. And then the main part of the talk is how we engage youth as co-creators of research, so what the process looks like. I'm going to show you their art. Some of it I went through actually and pulled all the art we've collected over the last 5 years together for this, and we have over 60 slides of youth art, so I'm not going to do all of it, but I'll present some pieces. And then Stafford and I will give concluding thoughts kind of from our different lenses. So Stafford, I'll just turn it to you to talk about the program and just tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
Sounds great. Yeah. So in a nutshell, I'll give you a brief overview of what WiseGuyz is. So it's a gender transformative program that works with young men, primarily ages 13 to 18. It's a comprehensive program that teaches healthy relationship skills, looks at sexual health and consent, also gender reflection, looking at gender in the media and critically analyzing masculine health harming behaviors and supporting young men to build protective factors against those. Also steps into bystander engagement and supporting young men to have an influence within their own communities. So it's a comprehensive program. We do it within schools, within community settings, and now working within justice settings as well too. But the foundation is healthy relationships, social emotional learning that supports these young men to consider, again, harming behaviors to themselves and those that they impact. Yeah, so that's sort of the program in a nutshell. There's lots of exciting things that happen with teenage boys throughout that process, a lot of relationship building, a lot of challenging norms and creating conversations for them to express themselves, hear each other's voices. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So I guess the next slide. Yeah, so what happens in a WiseGuyz? So again, we do connect with some of these, especially our school-based programs, happens over 20 sessions. We do have, again, shorter programs within certain settings based on community or restrictions of the place we're connecting. But over the course, each time we do connect with the WiseGuyz, we really foster a certain type of space so that we can connect and allow them to share and us to learn together. Part of that is sort of setting up rights and expectations within that space. The program really fosters, again, an understanding of human rights and sexual and reproductive health rights. So we create that within the space, right, for them to participate, to pass that practice of consent that's sort of a daily thing within the group. Talking about boundaries through privacy and respect, and really understanding what does that really mean, and that grows and evolves over the course of the year. And enjoyment is a key motivator for them. It's a place that's not about judgment or shame, but actually, again, about what allows them to actually feel like they can enjoy themselves in a way that other people within the group can as well. Yeah, so setting those rights allows space for a check-in, which we do each week. We connect with the young men, and that's where they get to share what's going on. Share the things that are important to them. It's a connection piece too, so they start to get to know guys that maybe they don't get to know in other settings, and experience what it feels like to share and also to be listened to and supported. The curriculum activities, that's where we jump into something that, again, is an intentional sort of transformational learning experience that is, again, often through an activity, but something that creates a little bit of sort of critical discussion. Not prescriptive, but opening up their space to share how they think and feel and learn together. Break, because they need food, they need some, the attention spans are something we always like pay attention to. And again, wanting it to be, we're like, this is a great intellectual discussion. Like, actually, they're just hungry and, need some food. So that's part of it, keeping them engaged and fed. And then jump back into the discussion. And usually that's sort of the aftermath and reflection of the activity we've done to sort of instigate some critical thinking. And chill time, which I think we all need. I do this morning as well, too. It's been great, but hectic morning. Yeah.
Cool. And the sessions are in the school-based program between 75 to 90 minutes in an ideal world.
Yeah. Yes. So again, yes. Do you want to go through this part, Jane? I'm happy to share as well.
Yeah, you can talk to this one.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate. I started off as a WiseGuyz facilitator. So I joined in 2013, but started in 2010. But when I first started, it was in 3 junior highs here in Calgary. But since then, yeah, reached over 2,000 youth within the WiseGuyz program, over 100 sites in 3 provinces and territories, continuing to scale and grow. It's kind of what I've come back to support here at the center. Yeah, so it's continuing to scale and grow across the country into different settings and with different partners. It's exciting to see that.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do in terms of arts-based evaluation. So I think we're presenting today for this organization because we have a community university research partnership that's now going into its 8th year somehow. It feels like it hasn't been that long. So the organization that Stafford works for, the Center for Sexuality, are the developers, implementers, owners, trainers for WiseGuyz. And then my team at the University of Calgary, called the Hope Lab, has been working alongside them since 2016 to evaluate the program in lots of different ways. And it's been a really fruitful and engaging partnership that we're fortunate to get to continue for a number of years moving forward, with some funding that will be announced later, but we're really excited to keep working together. And so in this methodology that I'm going to tell you about, we really view youth as partners. So they're really helping us to collect the data, to analyze it, to disseminate it in order to really center youth voice. So in our evaluation, we use lots of different methods. We're a very mixed method research lab. So of course we use surveys because quantitatively we want to see change over time within WiseGuyz and as compared to guys that don't take the program. And we used interviews and focus groups traditionally to ask youth for their thoughts about what they were learning, what they liked, what they didn't. But the average age of youth in WiseGuyz is 14. And so we know they have a lot to share. The facilitators see that within the programming, but the interviews and focus groups, they got at some things, but we felt like it wasn't really getting at the depth of their learning. And some of that has to do, I'm a developmental psychologist focusing on adolescent development. So some of that has to do with the cognitive capacity that's really growing and building during this age period. But it can still be tricky to conceptualize abstract thoughts. It can be hard as adults. It can be even more challenging as we're developing those capacities. And so asking youth, they can tell us what they like and don't like about the program, but asking them, for example, how did your thoughts on gender change? That's a very abstract, hard question to answer. But we know from facilitators that they are having these epiphanies and they are realizing these things. So we wanted to think of a way where we could really get at those learnings in a way that was a lot more developmentally friendly, that was also more youth-centered, that would let them really share and tell us about their experiences versus us asking them questions. And so actually on a trip down to collect focus group data at one of our rural sites, myself and a colleague, Dr. Deb Herlock, started talking about the possibility of using arts to do this. And so if you're familiar with arts-based work, obviously Photo Voice has been around for almost 2 decades now. Other work before that has used art to identify changes, to really advocate for policy change. But after we had this discussion and I went back to the literature, we realized it hadn't really been used as a form of program evaluation. So to actually look at changes experienced by youth within a program. And we really liked the idea of arts because it decenters power. So it changes who the expert is in deciding if change happened and if that change was meaningful. So it really puts the youth in the position of being the one in charge of telling us that. It takes away from conducting research sort of on youth to really having youth be participatory, part of the process, engaging in a number of ways. And I'll kind of tell you about that as we go through some of the examples. We've done it in a number of different settings now. And, all youth are able to do this work in some way. And so we thought this was exciting. We also felt like, part of the work we do is trying to advocate for not just WiseGuyz, but gender transformative programming, healthy relationships programming more broadly at the policy level. And so having this kind of art can be really influential for policymakers and other key stakeholders. And so for all of those reasons, we thought art would be a great method. When we started this work back in 2017, we really drew on the photo voice literature as well as the visual storytelling literature. So having youth show us a photo and tell us about that using pretty simple prompts. We now have expanded it to any kind of art, not just photos, but we did write a paper on the method we developed, and I have a link at the end if you're interested in reading about that. So within visual storytelling broadly, so asking or getting participants who are co-researchers to tell you about their art, you want to use really simple prompts. So again, you're not telling them what kind of change you're looking for or directing them, that they're really the ones who get to tell you. And that could be that no change happened as well. And so these are the prompts that we came up with and that we still use, which is, can you create art or take photos or make a dance or whatever you want to do to tell us what it was like to be a guy in your world before WiseGuyz and since WiseGuyz. So this allows for them to express change if it happened, but also if it didn't, to just say, well, like it's pretty similar, but using art as a metaphor. And, when we first did this, we did a whole training for youth on like art as metaphor. And we still do that if we have time and space, but given how much youth use photos as metaphor through TikTok, through Instagram, through Snapchat, they're very, very ready to do this kind of work and don't need a bunch of training to understand how to use art to express their emotions. So it actually really works well with how they express their emotions on a daily basis. Anyway. So I'm going to show some examples. Like I say, we have many. These are just a selection. It was hard to cut down because they're all so great, but I thought I just tried to pick some on different themes and from different sites. So we've used this method in a number of different settings at this point. So in a rural school-based setting, in an urban community-based setting focused on mental health, and then a remote and northern school-based setting. And across these settings, youth have different cognitive capacities, developmental capacities. And so we've been really happy to see that with this method, wherever youth are at, we can meet them there with this method, that they can contribute in a way that fits them and what they want to express about the program. So I've organized the art kind of by WiseGuyz theme, although as you'll see, it really overlaps. Obviously, these all intersect, but just to kind of give it some organization. So in terms of healthy relationships, this is a theme that comes up a lot in these pictures. We do tell them, obviously the pictures can't be identifying, and so we do get a lot of nature photos, so you'll see that. So this is from a youth at Site 2 who said, what was it like to be a guy in your world before WiseGuyz? Sometimes like rough on the edges, but if you dig in, you can get like a smooth surface. Well, like sometimes life is kind of tough. Sometimes I feel that before WiseGuyz, I was in areas and it's rough in some places. It was kind of bumpy, you know. Sometimes it was good and then it was bad. Then like you talk to people at WiseGuyz, that was his before. So not having, you know, a lot of ability to maybe talk about some of the things that were going wrong, which we know is a very common masculine norm, that you're stoic, that you keep emotions to yourself. And this is his after picture, where he says basically, so eventually you'd go through some dense brush and then eventually you'll get into the open and kind of be like free. People are all around you, kind of like having to really hold everything inside. When you hit the outside, you can kind of like express yourself. So he's talking about making it through this dense brush and then post WiseGuyz feeling more that he can express himself, which is something we hear over and over again in this method, that they're able to share things that they felt they couldn't before, often because of the restrictions placed on them as a young guy. This is one picture from Northern school-based site. So Jeff Grizzly said before and during, he was learning how to take care of himself. And then after, he picked actually, so he picked the black and white, and like the kind of being curled up is like not really knowing a lot. And then after, the color and arms spread out, that he's learning important life skills. So being a lot more expansive. So these were his ideas about how he wanted to visually represent the changes. In terms of sexual health, this is another area where we see a lot of feedback. So this is an example from a rural school-based site where John said, before WiseGuyz, my knowledge of sexual health and masculinity was very one-sided, almost like tunnel vision. The lack of color represents the lack of knowledge in terms of sexuality, gender, masculinity. And then for his after picture, he picked much more color. He called this photo Guiding Light. We try to get them to put a title on their photo and then a little caption so we can create photo displays and photo books. So John said, after WiseGuyz, my knowledge became very expansive and clearer because of the open community environment. I, as a person, have become more open with my loved ones. So that kind of calls back to that photo we saw a few slides ago about this idea of being more open, more able to share, which is a theme that comes up a lot. This is when we started using not just photos, so this is a drawing. And so this is from a remote school-based site. And so Connor said before, he didn't really know how to use condoms. So that's his drawing. And then after, so he went from how to use condom to easy. So because of WiseGuyz, I know how to use things. So condoms, and then I know like stuff like stereotypes. So for him, it was a very tactile learning, but very important about sexual health. And so that's great to see as well. And he has expressed that through drawing. Gender in the media. So this is the third module in WiseGuyz. This is putting all the photos together. This is by far the biggest category. So it was very hard to pick a few to show you, but I picked one from site 2, which was our urban community mental health site. And so CO2 says, I feel that before WiseGuyz, I was in that hole. And I think most people are aware you follow their stereotypes. Everyone says like guys hate pink, guys don't play with dolls, and you end up not doing things you enjoy because people think it's not okay. And then after, he called this darkness before light. After WiseGuyz, I feel like I've worked through the forest of stereotypes to say my opinions and freedom to do what you like without being told it's wrong. And then lastly, human rights, advocacy, and allyship is the fourth module. That's where, in part, like Stafford mentioned, they go over bystander intervention. So this photo is from site 1, which was the rural school-based site. Sky called it locked in. He says this photo represents how before WiseGuyz, guys can feel like they need to comply to a system to be masculine. It can be difficult to break out of the system, almost like a lock. Without assistance, you can be stuck in and forced not to be yourself. And then after, he used the image of melting snow to show clarity and detail, representing guys' idea about masculinity. They understand that they don't need to conform to standards as applied to them, but are able to be their unique selves as well. They can take their knowledge and spread it to others. So using this imagery in nature to demonstrate this idea of spreading knowledge, which was really cool. So those are just like a very quick selection given our time. I could go for hours. They're all really awesome in their own way. They each contribute something unique about what the youth learned. And this is one of my favorite projects to do because it's really awesome to see, even with youth sometimes who maybe you're not sure if the program content is connecting, what they're able to then share through their art can be really informative from a research perspective, and I think also very affirming for facilitators, that even if it doesn't quite look like they're getting it, like it is sinking in its own way. So from a research perspective, we think about utility and feasibility and acceptability. So utility in terms of usefulness. So we think this is a very useful way to collect evaluation data. I've collected interview data from mid-adolescents for a long time, and this is by far the richest data I've been able to collect. Like, I get emotional reading, just even reading back when I was putting all the slides together. It's amazing to hear what they have to say and to really show how thoughtful they are. I think youth still get a bad rap for being impulsive and not, fully developed, and maybe they don't have that much to say. And if you work with youth, that's not true. They have a bunch of things to say. They're so smart, they get it. And I just feel like this method really showcases that. And so I really love that about it. And certainly when we show it to school divisions or policymakers, they're really engaged with it too, which is great, because we want the youth voice to be front and center when we're sharing knowledge back. It's very feasible to do. We've now done it in a lot of different ways. We did it during the pandemic, so we figured out how to do it remotely. We've done it, in community-based and school settings and remote settings, where when we went to do it, the schools were closed due to a wildfire, so we did some remote stuff again. So it's a very flexible method. And we can kind of adapt it as needed to meet the context of a given site and what their youth want to do. In the northern site, they're actually a little bit more behind in programming. So typically we do this method after module 3, the gender module, somewhere in there. But they were only starting module 2, the sexual health module. And so what their facilitator is having them do is they made their art at the beginning of module 2, and that's one of the ones I showed you. But at the end of the year, in a few months, they're going to go back, revisit their art and update it based on other things they've learned. So that's a very cool way of doing it as well. So it's very flexible. One of the things that's really important to us, because youth are partners and co-creators, is that we can pay them. And so we have applied to do this in some school divisions, who then told us we weren't allowed to pay youth. And so we pulled the project because we think that's so critical. So one challenge can be that there may be institutional rules around compensating youth for their work as artists. And so that's something that you might need to keep in mind. In terms of sharing youth names, that's something our ethics board has actually been really good about. And so we now have a form youth sign off on if they want to use a pseudonym, if they want to use their real name, because again, like, it's important, it is their art. And so we want to make sure if they want to claim that publicly, they can do so. I would say most don't, but some really do. And so we want to be able to offer them that option. And then in terms of acceptability, youth seem to really like this process. Sometimes they need prompts and support. So some scaffolding, either from us as a team or from their facilitator, just to get them thinking about what they might do. But once they get started, they usually just take off on their own and do it. They enjoy making the art. They don't really find it too onerous. They seem, when we ask them, to like telling us about what they're learning. And so from that perspective, we find it acceptable for youth and for partners. So overall, it is a very rich method. It is a little more time intensive, both getting the photos, talking about the photos, putting the photo displays together. But I think that time intensity versus the richness of data really makes it worth it. So I'll turn it back to Stafford just to talk about some practice perspective pieces on this method.
Yeah. In connection, like, I think as far as that connection between research and practice, this specific arts-based research has been something that I think really validates what the practice is. So as far as centering the youth within the program, to use a research method that also does that, centers them, and then I think really feeds back into how we connect and approach with the young men. So I think as far as that alignment between research and practice, I've never felt as deep a connection as to the arts-based research. Also within the young men, it's something that I think they always find validation, that their voice does feel heard, that that the program really is about them, the way that we try and support them. And as a practitioner too, often we develop this program, and it's based on some of the wonderful research that Danara has done. But really what's important is how it's landing on the young men. And I think sometimes with the other forms of research, it's us kind of wanting to hear certain things back or framing it in a way that's based on our understanding. This really opens it up to say, let's honestly hear the ways that it's impacting you, and it opens it up to more possibilities around what that impact is, as opposed to what we want it to be. And that expression is really, really validating. And again, it's another experience that is in alignment with what the program's supporting. Them to be expressive, that their perspectives do matter, that they do get to think and feel about things, and that's important. So it's become, it's a very integrated part, and it's really fed back and really informed the program the way all the research that Danara has been doing. It really affects the practice, and inspires the practice, and continues to learn as we learn from the youth, and from the research.
Great. So we're almost at our time. So I just want to thank, obviously, we get to be here today and tell you, but like this, it's a village. So first and foremost, to our youth artists who are graciously sharing their thoughts with us, their work. We're very appreciative to the school divisions and community agencies who support this, as well as facilitators. So compared to sort of regular research, facilitators do get a bit more engaged in terms of helping youth to maybe think about ideas or make sure they're doing their art. So we're very appreciative for that. Dr. Deb Herlock and Dr. Kathleen Sitter, who worked on the original method. And then my team of trainees, Jordan, Kaylee, Emily, Alyssa, and Marissa, they've all been really instrumental in doing this work, and it would not happen without them. And then our funders as well. We're very grateful for the funding to be able to do this. So I know now we're going to have some time for questions, but I also wanted to put this up. On our lab website, hopelab.ca, we have all of our WiseGuyz publications, and most of them are open access. So if you want, we have a publication both on how we did the original method, and then on our findings from our first round in the rural school-based setting. And then we're now working on subsequent publications on those other examples I showed you. We also have research summaries in French and English. If you don't want to read the whole paper, you can just read a snapshot, as well as plain language summaries that are accessible to text readers. So if you go to hopelab.ca, you can get all of that stuff. And then soon, probably in the next week, we've just finished the WiseGuyz implementation manual. So that goes over the whole program, adoption, implementation, sustainability, how you get trained. And that will be posted to our website and the Center for Sexuality in the next week, probably. So if you want more on the program itself, check back in a week and you'll be able to download that and learn more of the nitty-gritty of the actual program and how it works. So anything you want to say, Stafford, before we move to questions?
No, I think that's wonderful. Thanks, Danara.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you both so much for that excellent overview, both of the program as well as the evaluation, and how you've really used this innovative way to engage youth in the evaluation. So thank you, and we'll open it up to questions. So here I don't see any questions that have come through yet from the presentation. So please feel free, anyone, enter questions into the chat. And I see our first question just came through. So we have a question from Patsy. Just wondering if you're working with anyone from public health on this project.
Do you mean like the Public Health Agency of Canada, or more like public health units? Maybe if you could just clarify.
Hi, it's Patsy here. So I was just wondering if there was anyone from like the School of Public Health at U of A, like staff or anybody working on the research, practicum students. It's just really interesting work, and I can see some of the linkages. And I'm in the School of Public Health right now, and so I can definitely, I know about PolicyWise and obviously the Public Health Agency of Canada, but I see a real connection between what you're doing and just public health overall. It's really important work.
Cool, thanks. I can speak on the research end. So all the research right now runs out of my lab at U of C, but that being said, like we're always open to, especially trainees, if you have interest in some of this work, connecting with us. We do have sort of like guidelines on how trainees can engage with the data and things like that. So yeah, not right now, but always open to future things.
Yeah, and I'd say from the practitioner perspective in the WiseGuyz program itself, like that's been the beautiful thing of having the research partnership with Hope Lab is, again, we do a lot of the practical work. So really connecting with these young men, fostering their experience, and then drawing the connections to what it is actually creating sort of within their school communities and the actual application to larger health issues has been incredible. Started off as like, hey, let's do sex ed for boys specifically because they were missing the conversation. Drawn into a much more comprehensive program based on people connecting, say, oh, that's important. This does connect to this part of health for young men, but also the folks that young men impact. So that's why the research partnership is really important. It's allowed it to grow.
Thank you. And hopefully, Patsy, that's answered your question. Feel free to ask follow-ups. I'll jump to the next questions. This is kind of more of a technical research side of things question from Courtney. Can you explain the analysis methods you use to triangulate the arts-based data and any other qualitative or quantitative data? And maybe I'll add to that too, because I know in arts-based methods, you know, part of that analysis is done just even in the youth's understanding of their description. So if you can speak to, you know, anything about that being participatory as well.
Sure. So there's sort of a few pieces to this. And so what I showed you now are the captions the youth themselves come up with for their photos. And those captions are what go in any like dissemination tools, displays, photo books. We also interview youth in a visual storytelling type interview to tell them, to get them to ask, for us to ask them about their photos. So like, what is this? What does it represent? So it's a very beyond open-ended guide. It has like 5 questions and we just sort of go through with them. We then analyze those data as qualitative data with reference to the photos. You know, we do have a youth advisory. We've brought stuff back to them for sure to look at, but I would say that part is more researcher driven and then the display is like totally youth driven. In a perfect world, we also then like to have all the artists from that site come together and talk to each other about their art. That leads to super rich discussions. We've actually only been able to do that once between the pandemic, wildfires, etc. So it can be done without that. I think it's a really nice piece if you can. So the interview data that we get, we then code that alongside the photos and then talk about sort of how the photos and the text together exemplify different themes. And then we can connect those themes back to things that we're seeing in the quantitative data using sort of standard mixed methods approaches. If you have follow-ups, let me know. But
quite an intensive process with, you know, so many different layers and steps to it with that analysis, you know, starting from the youth themselves, even in that the narrative kind of storytelling interviews. I'm wondering, you said you have some publications about your method. Do any of those publications speak to that analysis portion?
Yes. So the one that's actually the one we did on the first photo, sort of the outcomes paper, talks about the analysis and then has like the themes alongside the photos from that first site. And then we're just working on one from that second site and it'll be very similar in that way. So, but if you have, you know, questions, please also feel free to email me if it's not answered in there. But yeah.
Excellent. So some of those publications on the Hope Lab website then might be helpful for further explanation of that analysis method. And a question from Stephanie wondering why photography specifically was selected. I'm curious to know if other art mediums were considered.
Yeah. So when we first thought about doing this several years ago, my colleague Deb and I, she had experience with photo voice, and I think in the literature, it's, you know, probably within arts-based methods, it's a lot, very well used within public health, and there's a lot of information. And so we read a lot on different methods, but had decided to do this kind of blend of photo voice and visual storytelling, kind of based on what information was available, the expertise of our team. that was sort of the decision point. But starting with our third round, we expanded it to any kind of art to better reflect that some youth might want to draw or paint, or I mean, it could be anything. They can make a dance. I will say within that, probably most still take photos, although in our last round, which was in a northern setting, like 90% of them did draw. And so I did show that one drawing of the condom. So we've now expanded to whatever art they want to do. Yeah, so that was sort of as research evolves, we kind of started with what we knew and then have expanded since. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Stafford.
No, I think again, the richness of the photos was something that, again, it was sort of low labor for them, as well as, they could and it's also something they're really used to doing. That's the way that they are communicating. So it seemed to tap in, but it's neat to see how things expand as we open it up. And I'm curious to see what are other art forms people might start to utilize a little bit more. I'm excited to see what comes.
And, most youth rural, remote north, like have a camera in their pocket. So it's very accessible for them. And is like some may want to draw or do a collage, but we had someone use Canva in this last round. But I think the photos, because we also say like they don't have to go out and take new photos. They can go through their photo roll. If there's something in there that they think speaks, they can use that. So I think for a lot of them, it's a pretty low burden way. But if they want to now at this point, if they want to draw, or they can certainly do that.
Dance would be amazing.
Dance, yeah, totally.
That's really neat to consider, even just the different cultural contexts. You spoke about the different sites, the different settings that the youth are in, and allowing for some cultural nuance as well, and how a youth might feel most comfortable expressing themselves. I'll go to the next question about REB approvals. So wondering if facilitators are considered part of the research team when you go through ethics.
Yes, and do they need, I saw take TCPS too. So yes, they are, but in our REB, external partners, so community partners don't have to do the TCPS2 training. So obviously as PI, like I'm responsible for training them, for telling them like what you can and can't say and do and kind of their role. But that ability to add external partners is actually really important because we have a lot of community partners. And so that would be really onerous. I do know that's not the case everywhere. And like, if you're in the States, they often have to take city training, which is the equivalent, which is a huge barrier to engaging community partners. So I'm very grateful that at our REB, we can add those external members, and then I just have to explain like how I will make sure that everything obviously is following ethical principles and guidelines.
Thanks for sharing. It's an interesting model when you're engaging the facilitators to also really, facilitate the data collection process in that.
I mean, so we found this in other ways too. Like there's this idea, and we've really worked with our ethics board, and they've been very open to this, that like, oh, it should be, we don't want youth to be influenced, and it should be, arm's length, and these people, they don't know. But actually for a lot of youth, that does not lead to psychological safety, especially youth in residential facilities. Like they don't know us. We're just some weird adults coming in to ask questions. So having that option of like having their facilitator there or their youth worker, it's actually about increasing psychological safety and not about like coercion. And so we have been able to work with our REB around that, and they've been really accommodating to, take where youth are at into account and what's going to make them feel most safe in that situation.
That's a really important, consideration when we're talking about these community-based forms of research is, ethics, it goes beyond traditional ethics to think about the ethics of the partnerships that you're entering into and the relationships and that psychological safety in this case as well. So I'm sure there's lots of interesting nuances there.
Yes.
It was, again, as facilitator, when we first did those photo voices, I think it was a cool part of that, building that trust between facilitators and researchers as well. There was a great communication around what the arts-based research was about. So we as facilitators really got to understand what it was going to serve, how it was going to support these young folks to share. And so like we got some great insight and connection from Dayanara and Deb Herlock, as well, as we were doing that first version. And so it creates a nice partnership between the facilitators and the researchers too.
Mhm, mhm. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I mean, we hear that quite a lot in community-based research that, the entry into the research and building those relationships between community and the researchers, a lot of the success of research partnerships can um, depend on the strength of that trust. So that's neat to hear.
Mhm.
I'll go to the next question. You mentioned some challenges with certain schools in paying students for their work. Are there other barriers to this work that come to mind? Challenges that the university contributed to or could work to remove in the future? So I'll maybe expand that question, both on your engineer from the university, but also Stafford from your end working with the youth. Like, are there barriers or things that could be done in the future to make this type of work easier to facilitate?
Do you want to start or?
I can I guess maybe just very practically from and then you can expand on it. But yeah, again, the communication and reasoning that we got from Dan and the team made it simple. And starting with the photos again, I think that was the thing that made it quite simple. And us again connecting it to a lot of the other, it really fit with the things that we were doing with the youth anyway, as far as getting them to do things, reflect and share. So it wasn't it really was quite smooth. So the key thing was again making it a low time commitment. It wasn't something they were going to go and have to spend a bunch of hours, but they could do it quickly. It wasn't a homework assignment. It wasn't like that kind of thing, and make it feel just a part of what the group was about. That really helped with some of the barriers. Um, yeah, so it's been surprisingly easier than getting them to sit down and fill out the pre-post test, which to be honest, there was less barriers than that, I'd say, because it was just integrated into another reflective activity that they enjoyed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think in that, like, they want to do it, like they really like doing it, so that can be helpful. And maybe I'll integrate, like, in my response challenge, because I see a question about parent consent. So yeah, the payment thing is a non-negotiable. When that happened, we had a discussion as a team and decided based on the ethics of youth participation that was not negotiable. So that for us is going to happen. One thing we haven't, I want to say it's a barrier, but we haven't actually asked is, like, I'd really like to be able to use cash, like in the north, to pay participants for, gift card bound. I haven't actually asked, so I don't want to say I can't. So that's something I'm thinking about for our next round, because we did do gift cards and it's all good, but we end up buying Visa gift cards, which, have a fee. And so that's one thing that I've been thinking about, because we obviously want youth to be able to use the payment for their work. Time is always a barrier. Arts stuff is now integrated into the curriculum in some settings, so like they're already doing it. And so getting time for the interview isn't so hard because they're actually pretty quick, like they're 15 to 30 minutes usually. But finding that time for that second, like, group where they talk to each other, and which is really awesome, has been really hard because of many things, but just especially in rural and remote settings, like they can't stay after school, they have to take the bus or they're not going home. So that, time piece, of course, is always a barrier. Parent guardian consent. So per sort of standard understandings of youth agency to consent, our ethics board allows us for youth 14 and up in community settings to consent on their own. However, that doesn't apply in school settings or residential facilities. So we're back to that issue. And so that's really not an REB thing. That's more institutional barrier within schools. We have been advocating. So the thing about WiseGuyz is we just say for boys, but like it's anyone who identifies as a boy. But there are folks who might identify that way who aren't out at home. And so we have had circumstances both for program consent and research where it wouldn't be safe for them to ask to sign up because that might disclose that they're attending this program for boys. And so we have asked for waivers of consent in that case. It hasn't worked out yet, but it's something we continue to advocate for. But that's not on our REB end, that's on more of a school division end. And obviously they have their own needs and concerns around liability, but like that definitely, like there are cases beyond just the, like, it's very hard to get consent back from 14-year-olds where it could be a safety thing. And so that's something we continue to advocate for and work on. But yeah, we have, processes, but getting parent consent return is just really hard. Not again, because they don't want their kids to do it, but like to take a form home. In the north, we were able to use oral consent, which really helps. So I could just call home and explain the project and sign off that way. So we try different things, but yeah, it's an ongoing battle.
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to
Since
add
we're on
anything,
this,
Stafford, on the program consent piece that I didn't, because they also have to get usually parent consent to do the program within school settings.
Yeah, it can be a barrier. Also leads to lots of conversations too, because sometimes we are trying to engage natural support, so it leads to a conversation. Again, sometimes resistance, sometimes super supportive. Sometimes again, no communication. So it's a different thing. But it is a part of every young guy that we're connecting with. We know that they have natural supports around them, and the program is to support, make those connections, to support those connections, and it's a part of their life. So yeah, it comes up often just in the discussions when we go into new communities, new schools. People have questions and want to talk about it, and I'm always grateful for whenever we have those connections, even when there is resistance. It's a great opportunity. Um, yeah, and then consent forms, getting these 14-year-old boys to think past the end of the session, and it's normal barriers, but we've managed in lots of ways.
Mhm. I think maybe I see there's Sunny, you had a question about the program, but I think I'm going to skip to the other question since we're talking about ethics, and then I'll go back up to your previous question. But on this topic of ethics, there is a question about how you navigate protecting the youth images and storing the data, um, recognizing that there are big challenges when researching, um, especially when you consider vulnerable or young populations. So how do you, in quotations, please the ethics committee, or I guess how do you do that in an ethical way?
Yeah. Um, so we've only, for all of these projects, had to go to the full board once, when it was in a residential facility. And their concern there wasn't so much about the youth images, but more what youth might take pictures of, and that we might, anyway, get like sexually inspired images. And so, talking about sort of how we vet images, what we use, what we don't, what we tell youth about what images we can use. We have maintained no identifying images, but for a number of reasons. I mean, that's pretty common in photo-based ethics, but also because they are young and, they might change their minds. So nothing, no buildings or faces, or like we had one last year submit, it was his dog because he wanted to show us being sad versus happy. And in the version we ended up putting on the poster board, we like covered part of the dog just because even that could potentially be identifying. So in that way, we don't have identifying images. We have, though, advocated that youth can use their real name. And that's really about youth getting to take ownership of their work and their art. And when it's displayed, that if they want so in the original publication, we didn't have that option. We now do. So I have been wrestling with like, do we put their real name in the publication? Because that's a lot more long-standing versus like the displays that go up. So that, there are these ethical dilemmas that you have to work through for sure. Thinking about the fact that, they are young and might change their minds. So kind of balancing youth agency with sort of protection, but not from a paternalistic point. But I have to say, like, yeah, our ethics, we've just really explained why we're doing what we're doing and the rationale behind it. And they've been really open to that. So we haven't, and even when we went before the full board, like we were able to respond to those concerns. Yeah, just with rationale. And a lot of the folks on these boards haven't worked with youth, and so may have ideas, for example, about how influenced they can be, like that they might sign up just because a researcher wants, like, well, no, they'll just say no. But so I think also just some of that education around like what it's actually like to work with youth, particularly vulnerable youth, and where the safety concerns are and where they're not, and giving that some of that education can be really important too.
One of the things that struck me earlier too is you spoke about, you call the youth artists and you say that they own the images. You're really one of the things we talk about in community-based research is that ownership and control over the data that's being collected. And even just the language and how you speak about it, you really are showing that, these images are produced by the youth. They're the artists, they're the owners. So you've embedded a lot of that even in the way you speak about it. So I think we have two more questions that I'm seeing, and we should have just enough time to get through them. So another question here about the community partnership itself. So was the WiseGuyz program already existing? And did the researcher approach the organization? Or was, the curriculum for WiseGuyz co-developed? Just wondering if you can speak about, it sounds like that process of how this community campus partnership came to be.
Do you want? Okay. I can
You
speak
can
about the
speak.
partnership and you can speak about
Yeah,
the program. So
perfect.
yeah, so the program, which Stafford can speak to, has been around since 2010, obviously developing. And the Center for Sexuality approached me in 2016 about a potential partnership, just given some of the other work I was doing and yeah, just they're connected to some of my colleagues. And so we kind of got put together. And then that first year, really all we did was build the partnership. So we went through the partnership assessment toolkit, which is available online. We developed a memorandum of understanding that was executed by the university that we made sure had language that made it clear that the Center for Sexuality owned the program, just because there's been a history of maybe universities taking things that don't belong to them. And so, our university's kind of like, we don't need it. It's like, no, we really just put it in writing. So that was made really clear. So I think that first year, we didn't really do much research. We did a bit of survey stuff, but really it was about, we met quarterly, building that partnership and that foundation of trust. And then since then, it's really just grown and we've applied for grants and published and done all kinds of stuff. Community partners are co-authors on all the publications. They present. Stafford and I presented in Vegas. So they present with us. So we really try to make it very co-developed throughout the process, because at the end of the day, if it's not useful to the community agency, why are we doing it? At the same time, from the beginning, and this is also in the memorandum of understanding, as the evaluator, we evaluate, we find what we find, and we're going to publish that. And they agreed to that too, which is really important, that it wasn't going to be like, oh, well, we don't like that. And so I think having those conversations on both sides about what our values are, what's important, and then putting that down in a signed document has been really, was really foundational to the success of our partnership. So if you want to speak to that or the program itself, Stafford.
Yeah, and I say key thing for us too is it's very much within the values of the center. Our work is all research informed, so it's part of us wanting to do impactful programming, right? It's not what we think we're doing. We want to actually understand what we're doing. We are, again, client-centered organization, and WiseGuyz right from the beginning was meant to do that. So the research partnerships are very much serve us doing impactful work. And we started that, I think, even internally back as early as 2012. We had an internal with Dr. Deb Herlock coming in and doing focus groups. And we did, internal surveys in order to build and develop the curriculum to start up to 2016 when we connected with Dayanara. But right from the beginning, we want to hear from the participants. We want to actually measure the impact it's having so that we can support folks. That's what we do at the center. So we're not interested in what we think we're doing. We really want to know what we are doing and shift and learn. And it's been a real strength of the program. It allows us to speak to it with, to really stand behind the work we're doing, to speak for it, to advocate for the youth themselves. So it really serves the program. It's helped us even as facilitators for us to learn again around how we need to continue to grow and understand and do that. So it makes the work more exciting. It makes it more rigorous. It makes it also more inspiring because you do see the impact, you do see the results. And so it was just a mutually beneficial, and then ultimately to serve the program and grow the impact and serve the young folks that we're connecting with. It's inspiring. It was inspiring for me sort of when I was younger, but it was I was like, this is, part of something that feels exciting. So I see that with new facilitators and younger facilitators, that they value the research And then especially because we are scaling and I'm speaking and sharing, and to have Danera to connect with this and to talk to people, and it's not just this is an inspiring thing that resonates. It is, we have our personal experiences as facilitators with the young men and with what we see happening, but it's beyond this anecdotal experience. It really connects to these larger important shifts that are connected to, you know, the health and well-being of these folks in their community. So it's inspiring and motivating for facilitators right from the first time we start. And yeah, we're continuing to learn every single year.
Well, thank you so much. I see we're at the 1 o'clock mark, so I'll do a very quick wrap up, and folks can continue on with their day. Thank you to, you know, our presenters, Danera and Stafford. Thank you so much for being here with us. Danera, you echoed thank you as well to the youth artists already, and the facilitators and everyone else who has made this possible. And thank you to everyone who asked a question and is here with us, and my colleagues, Ali and Isabella, who helped facilitate the event today. For anyone who would like to revisit this in the future or share maybe this recording with other colleagues who couldn't be here today, you can find the event recording and the slides on our website under the resources tab and webinars and discussions. And one of my colleagues will post the link to that in the chat. We also very much encourage any of you who aren't already in touch with us to stay in touch with us. You can sign up for our e-news using the link that one of my colleagues will post on the chat. And this is where you'll get information on any of our upcoming events, our communities of practice, training opportunities, as well as e-news from all of our community members. Our next event in this series, continuing on with looking at youth in community-based research, we have a presentation on portaging through research with an Indigenous Youth Advisory Committee occurring in May. And this will actually be our first ever bilingual e-learning event. So we're working very hard to have the capacity to offer this event in both English and French, with translation available and bilingual facilitators. So the registration link for that will be in the chat as well. Lastly, we love to hear from you, how you find these events, what we can do differently, what we can do better, or what you'd like to see if there's future topics that you might be interested in. So feel free to scan this QR code or use the link in the chat to share your feedback with us. So one final thank you again for everyone being here with us today. And hopefully we see many of you in our next series. And thank you, Danera and Stafford, again for being here.
Thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you.
Bye, everyone.